This is Ken with Basement MTG, and I have a deck tech for you today. The name of the deck is Black-Red Counting Vampires. This will most likely be my last deck tech until Amonkhet is released later this month. So without further ado, let's look at the deck. The main pieces for this deck is 4 copies of Indulgent Aristocrat and 3 copies each of Metallic Mimic and Animation Module. The Metallic Mimic set to Vampire will put a +1/+1 counter on each of your vampires as they come into the battlefield, triggering the animation module in which you can pay 1 and create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. Using that token either as a chump blocker or as a sacrificial lamb to the Indulgent Aristocrat, which then puts a 1/1 counter on each vampire, including the Metallic Mimic as it is also a vampire, which then triggers the animation module. And if we have open mana, we continue to create 1/1 servo tokens. We can also activate the animation module by paying 3 and tapping to put a 1/1 counter on any of our creatures which already have counters on them. If you are able to get an additional Metallic Mimic into play, you could set that one to servo or choose Vampire again and start putting 2 1/1 counters on the vampires as they come into play. The red cards in the deck are 3 copies each of Bold Impaler, Bloodmad Vampire, and Stromkirk Occultist. The Bold Impaler is a 1-drop, and when we aren't using the mana to make servos, we can give the Impaler +2/+0, and with 2 colorless and a red mana. Bloodmad Vampire can help with making servos by putting a 1/1 counter on itself when it is able to do damage to a player. And the Stromkirk Occultist can help thin your library and help get some of the puzzle pieces onto the board. The first of the black creatures we are playing are 3 copies of Bloodbond Vampire. Bloodbond gains a 1/1 counter when we gain a life. We will synergize this with 4 copies of Gifted Aetherborn, which also has Death Touch, and with 3 copies of Vampire Envoy, which has flying. And when it comes in tapped, we gain 1 life. We are also playing 1 copy of Drana, Liberator of Malakir. She has flying and first strike, and when combat damage is done to a player, we put a 1/1 counter on each attacking creature we control. And since the damage is first strike, the counters will go on our other creatures before that damage is done. Rounding out the main deck, we have 2 copies each of Yahenni, Undying Partisan, Fatal Push, and Unlicensed Disintegration. With Yahenni, we gain that 1/1 counter as our opponent creatures die. Fatal Push and Unlicensed Disintegration for creature removal. Revolt should not be hard to get later in the game if needed for Fatal Push, as we can sack a servo to multiple creatures. The land is pretty simple, just 10 mountains and 14 swamps. If you have the cards already, you might consider adding a few Foreboding Ruins, Smoldering Marshes, or Cinder Barrens. They do come into the battlefield tapped unless certain situations are met, but could slightly help with mana fixing. Finally, with the sideboard, I have 2 Grasp of Darkness which can be used for removal, 3 copies of Daring Demolition which can be brought in against Mardu vehicles, 2 copies of Perilous Predicament, 4 copies of Shock which can be brought in against Sahili Right combo decks, 2 copies each of Shamble Back and Incendiary Flow, which can help keep Scrap Heap Scrounger out of play. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this deck tech. Counting Vampires runs about $38.50 on TCG Player and 10.25 tickets on Magic the Gathering Online. Once again, I hope you've enjoyed this deck tech. Subscribe to my channel, leave the like, leave me any comments that you have down in the comments section, and I will see you with Amonkhet.